From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I have Oliver Sild of Patchstack, the founder, with me, and we talk about how he founded his company and more. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, and enjoy the conversation that Oliver and I had. This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. Today I'm here with Oliver Sild, the founder of Patchstack. How are you today, Oliver?
Doing great. How are you?
Not too bad. And thanks for joining me all the way from Estonia. How's the weather there at this time of year?
Actually, it's getting warmer now. It's nice because the sun is getting on your face. You can kind of feel the warmth, and then you go outside. It's still like minus 5 degrees, but it is getting warmer and warmer every day, actually.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So before we jump into the story of Patchstack a little bit, what's your WordPress origin story? How did you get into WordPress and that whole realm?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to around 2013 or something like that. I was running an agency together with a friend. We mainly built sites on Joomla back then, and then kind of naturally you started to see more and more demand on WordPress. Like people didn't. I mean, we used to use Joomla as a stack, and then at one point we realized that like customers came to us specifically asking for WordPress. So we kind of started shifting from Joomla to WordPress from there. And yeah, like for a few years, we basically focused on building websites on WordPress, on WooCommerce, and actually already back then, like our agency's kind of focus was providing like secure web development. So we wanted to have already some level of like security built into what we deliver, so there wouldn't be like an issue where, I don't know, 2 years after the site has been developed, it's kind of abandoned by someone and doesn't get any maintenance and stuff like that. So we always this was our kind of promise as a company when we did web development. So this kind of always went on top of that.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head. You said secure web development. I think part of the problem is in the WordPress space, there's a lot of good developers and designers, but they focus on development and design. They actually don't focus on the security side. And before we went to record, I was telling you that a big part of my business is actually security care plans. So I'm kind of in that spot where I offer security care plans because I think a lot of designers and developers don't think that.
True, very true.
So that's a bit of a concern. So what is the story like? How did the Patchstack idea come about, and when did you found
it? So it goes really back to the same area to the same time when we did the agency or web development work. The thing was that back then we kind of realized quite soon enough that the main kind of one of the main problems was to like how do I keep track of like all the plugins and themes and whatever is being used on the website, the versions, all that stuff. Like one thing is to kind of keep track of that for one website, but the other thing is like how do I keep track of it for all the customers that we have. So we kind of built like an internal tool actually to do that. So we kind of had like a very simple internal tool that was kind of managing or like checking if like a new version of a plugin came out for a specific if a new update was for a specific plugin. We kind of had like internal backlog of like we built that website. I mean, this was updated then and then that uses these kind of versions, so forth. And this was just basically like an internal tool, and we kind of thought that this is our this is like our competitive advantage in terms of providing web development work and providing like website development in general, because we do it in a more secure way and we actually take more care of those websites and so on. And then around 2015 or so, we realized that, okay, yeah, but we're not the only agencies who's dealing with that. Like, we're not the only web development company who probably thinks that, oh, damn, like managing security for all those customers is a real pain in the ass. And what they really eventually do is that they just drop the customers. I mean, what they've done previously is that they get a new customer, complete the website development project, and then basically say that, good luck. So we knew that the problem was there. So in 2015, we actually went to we applied with the idea to kind of productize the internal tool, and then we came up with something called WebArcs, and we went into there was like a business development kind of program in Czech Republic back then. So I actually took a bus from Estonia, from my town to Brno, which is in Czech Republic, and it took me like 3 days of bus ride to get there. And then we basically ran on like a 3 months like intensive kind of business development kind of like a program, or like a kind of business accelerator or something, like our incubator or something like that. And then we managed to get like third place there, which was, we were quite impressed. Then got back to Estonia, and then we decided to basically drop the whole agency thing and completely focus on, back then, what was called WebArcs as the kind of panel for developers, for web developers who build websites, to kind of manage the security of their websites from a single kind of place.
That is a really interesting story, and congrats on where you've been. One of the things you mentioned was a lot of agencies get into updating websites and then they just kind of drop it. And I think the reason for that is, I still think from a selling standpoint, as somebody who's got over 100 clients in that space, it's a hard sell sometimes, because companies, so if you're selling to a client, they like to see design, they like to see changes, but things that are under the hood, that are out of sight, out of mind, they don't always see. And web agencies seem to not, many of them do a good job of communicating to their care plan clients on a regular basis. And you kind of got to, from a marketing standpoint, remind them of what you're doing for them. Out of sight, out of mind is not a good way to retain clients. It's the same problem in the insurance world. Like, people buy insurance, they never use it, and they say, why am I paying $100 a month? And the minute they drop it, we all know what happens. Something goes wrong, they smash up their car, and then they're out thousands of dollars. I mean,
you're touching a point that actually explains the situation of WordPress security. When we look at like where pretty much the majority of revenue has been made in WordPress ecosystem that is related to security, it's always been malware removal services for years. Like, it's always been that. And the problem with that is, if all the money is there, then who is then going to take the leap of faith and start working on actually solving the problem that they are fixing in the first place? I mean, you will keep removing malware as long as you don't have the root problem solved, which is the vulnerabilities on your website and so forth. So now, if all the money is there, and if it's so hard to sell for the users in terms of, you should prevent, not remediate, then you're going to be stuck in a situation where basically all the tools on the market, everything is basically driven in terms of, scan your website from malware, get rid of malware fast, that kind of angle, which actually isn't solving the problem at all. It's like literally not solving the problem. It is just a remediation for when the things already went bad. And this is maybe getting ahead of that. But this is literally what we realized at one point, and we decided to completely not even touch that side of the business and completely just focus on the very core issues with Patchstack.
I would agree with you. And the other thing to throw into this mix, and I don't really want to turn this conversation to a high level security conversation,
Yeah,
but it's worth mentioning is the whole backup component to the whole security stuff. And a lot of people separate that out. And I'm not a believer of that. And, you know, those on Twitter and those on LinkedIn and those who listen to this podcast know I'm a big proponent of, you did a backup. Have you ever tested to restore? Do you actually know your restore works? And that comes from my days in an enterprise environment where we used to do disaster recovery to make sure our restores actually work properly. And I think that's the other component. So what people don't realize is security, the functions Patchstack provides is one part of the solution, but it's not
exactly.
all the solution.
I can tell you from the business point of view, like when we were called WebArcs, obviously we learned so much over the years. Like we did mistakes, we kind of, already started to move the, the in from the current perspective in the kind of wrong way, and we started to turn WebArcs back then also into something that would cover everything, because that is something that the WordPress ecosystem is used to, like all-in-one solutions. I want to buy one thing, one click install, set it, forget it, and then basically, I have everything, right? I guess in terms of security, there's so many problems with that already, from the fact that set it, forget it is already like a really bad thing to say in security, because that means that you're removing yourself from the process, which is the most important part, because security has to be thought of as kind of a process of, or like a kind of ongoing effort of staying secure. It's not something that I apply or like press a button and now it happened. But yeah, with WebArcs as well, like at one point our platform included backups. We even started like looking into like different kind of scans, like in terms of we scan for crypto miners on the web. Like we went like way too broad. And what happens then is that you can't do really like everything very well at the same time. You need to have focus, and you need to realize that if we want to like solve one problem in the kind of ecosystem that we see is like a very prominent problem, and do it really well, we need to stick to it. And we need to like really stick to it. And that actually came to a point where we completely even rebranded the company, decided to drop a lot of features from the product, and then just thought that, okay, all our resources is going to go into solving this problem. And that has been the biggest and the greatest positive impact for the company that we've had so far.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. Now, we know the space is a little crowded. There's several big players in the space, including one that's owned by Automatic directly. What separates Patchstack from your competitors in the security space, in your opinion?
I think it is very much connected to the approach that we are taking from the kind of methodological standpoint, or like how we actually approach security in general, in terms of how we are trying to perceive it, not about, or like we're trying to avoid selling fear, for example. And at the same time, what we are trying to do is we know that this isn't a problem that, we now come up with a solution and then we are solving it. We have realized, and I think anyone who is in the space eventually realizes, that this is not something that you can solve alone. So what Patchstack does is that we are actually connecting the plugin vendors, the developers of the plugins, and ethical hackers together with the technology that we are building, to be able to cover as much as possible, as fast as possible, and to be as effective as possible. And that can only happen if we really work on the community aspect. And this is something that we're doing very hard. We have Patchstack Alliance, that is basically a bug hunting kind of community or platform for WordPress plugins. You can come to me, report a vulnerability in a plugin that is like a random plugin from WordPress.org repository. And we basically score you for that. We give you a score for contributing to the WordPress security. At that moment, we basically reach out to that developer and make sure we help them to apply the right fixes. And at the same moment, we add this information to Patchstack database, which is going to kind of give that information to the wider public. And then also at the same time, our like Patchstack app users who use our SaaS application for the firewall and protection, they actually get like instant firewall rules for these new vulnerabilities and so forth. And this researcher, in case, for example, you who reported this vulnerability to us, we make sure that we pay you. And that takes away the problem on the ecosystem where so many open source plugins like WordPress plugins, they might not have business behind them, which means that they might not have resources to get security audits, for example. But for us to be able to cover that, we just do that with building a security community behind WordPress.
So there's a couple of things I really like here, and I've always liked looking at Patchstack is you're community focused, and a really good example that we were talking before we went to record. Patchstack put out your 2021 report, and then there was a rebuttal on Master WP about the report, and then recently one of your team, Robert, posted an article kind of clarifying that report, addressing the criticism. And I thought the whole key was continuing to educate the community and saying, hey, let's help you guys and let's turn this into a positive. And I think that's one of the things your company does really well.
I think, the key point here in terms of anything related to community or building community or doing anything related to community is the discussion. We were actually really in a weird, like, I don't know if you noticed, but we actually shared the criticism about our white paper through our own channels. Like we actually shared the article that criticized our own company, and we shared that, hey, look how good criticism that is. Because there was very good points, and the idea of why we want to share that and why we also why Robert wrote the response to that was that this opens up the discussion, and discussion is exactly what we need in the space right now. We need to have an open discussion about security. We need to understand that fixing security issues is a good thing. It's not that, oh no, someone found the vulnerability in my plugin. Let's avoid let's not put any attention to that. So maybe nobody is going to talk about that. So, we're not going to get bad publicity. But no, we need to talk about that. And we need to talk about that so much that people get used to it and that people understand that fixing security issues is a really good thing. And you should actually trust the plugins who fix more security issues than less.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were talking about that earlier, and I kind of remember coming out of the freemius mess that we had a couple of weeks ago in this space, the biggest SDK issue we've ever had in this community. And, it's funny, one of the companies that was at the top of the list was the events calendar. And and a shout out to those guys because Gustavo and his team always do a great job in fixing stuff. And they were patched and recompiled and ready to go right away. And we're still out of that mess at the time of this record. We're still looking at about 50% of the plugin developers who are either ignoring it or not in business anymore, whatever reason. And I think ignoring security issues is frankly a big problem. And for me, that's a trust issue. Like, why would I trust somebody who doesn't want to fix what they produce?
Indeed. And what we have, coming back to the kind of Patchstack Alliance, kind of connecting the developers with ethical hackers part of the thing is that what we also see is that sometimes ethical hackers who are reporting vulnerabilities about like some plugins to us, they are not seen as contributors to the open source by the vendors, but more like some annoying type of people on the web. But in reality, they are contributing to the open source as much as the developers do, right? But at the same time, we also see that, apart from sometimes getting completely ignored, some don't even have the capabilities to fix those issues. I mean, when we work with vendors, like we do security audits for plugins, like really big ones, they come to us and get like these, like we offer that as a service separately as well. But also like we kind of intermediate security reports made by ethical hackers through the Alliance platform, and then we kind of stay in the middle of translating that security information to the vendor and telling them like, you should fix this and this here, so this vulnerability would be patched. And what we also see sometimes is that the owner of the plugin is actually not the developer of the plugin. The owner of the plugin had outsourced creation of that plugin some time ago. So right now, even though he is replying to us, he doesn't actually have any understanding of how to fix that either. So there's a lot of like these different edge cases and different angles that we need to kind of keep in mind when dealing with security and understanding like why the situation is how it is right now, and all of that needs open discussion.
Yeah, and it's things like, honestly, WordPress is now over 40% of the market. The bigger your market share becomes, the bigger the target you are. It becomes things like we know since COVID, with all the lockdowns, everybody's at home. So that means the hackers are at home too, with nothing better to do. And then you toss in the mess with the Ukraine that's going on in Russia right now. And before we went to record, we were talking about the increase of bot attacks that were going on and denial of service attacks. And that's just the nature that today war is not just fought on a physical level, it's also fought on an internet level. And that's a problem. So when you factor all these factors in, it just means we actually have to be more aware. And the key is to partner with somebody that helps you with your problem than to ignore it altogether.
Definitely, yeah. Like everything that is getting a lot of attention is going to be piggybacked on. So COVID, actually, like I mentioned previously, before we hit record, I mentioned like when COVID, like the lockdown and everything happened with the first wave, we actually started keeping like a database of all the different kind of threats that use COVID as a kind of backstory, or like using COVID as a like kind of like in some ways like for phishing attacks and like sending out kind of emails under the VHO, and there was like all kinds of different stuff, like even in the WordPress space where the like the COVID infection map plugin was nulled, and then basically eventually a lot of websites are using a null version of a plugin that they actually just wanted to kind of help people. I mean, they wanted to help people and share the information, but someone was basically just hijacking the attention for malicious gains. And this is happening with anything that is getting attention. So like a lot of those, if we're looking at the attacks that that are going on in terms of on the light of the whole thing that is happening in Ukraine, like not like all these attacks, or like a lot of those attacks are not even associated with the war itself. It's just people who are gaining some sort of benefit from just kind of piggybacking on that attention.
Yeah, it's
sad.
It is. It's really sad. What I have to ask a question, and it's not really a technical question. What is Patchstack's disclosure policy? So if you guys get a vulnerability, how do you go about processing without getting too technical, reporting that, and what do you do if the plugin vendor actually says go away?
It's a good question. It does, of course, it does happen. I mean, they're often the go away is also like not responding at all at one point. So the go away can be said in a different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, we even actually have the vulnerability disclosure policy on patchstack.com/database, where we have that publicly available as well, because we are one of the three officially announced CNAs in the WordPress space, which means that there is like a big organization in the world called MITRE, and for all the security vulnerabilities that are found in the world, they will get like a ID, or like international ID called CVE. And we are one of the companies in the space who has given the rights to apply CVEs for WordPress. So there's three companies. It's Patchstack, WordPress, and WP Scan, who is now part of Automatic.
Yep.
So we need to have this, like we have like a very kind of well-worked disclosure policy, because we need to work on that on this kind of legal barriers as well. But that actually means that, like, when our ethical hackers submit a vulnerability, let's say they submit it to us today, what happens is that we are going, like, we have internal team who goes over the vulnerability. We make sure that the report has all the information about the vulnerability and so forth. And the next step is that we are actually, if this vulnerability is something that may have affect the public already, we actually release a virtual patch immediately to all our customers. Then the second step is letting know the developer that, hey, there was a security vulnerability report made to us that is in your plugin. We try to communicate to them as much as possible. We basically we have a policy where I believe we send out 2 follow-ups, and if we don't get any reply even then we basically go into the 30 days disclosure policy, which is that once we kind of see that there is no inaction, then basically there's 30 days when we can disclose the vulnerability to the database, to the Patchstack database and to public, so the users could at least take action to patch their own websites, or remove the plugin, or have any way of remediating the situation. When the developer responds to us, then we always negotiate the disclosure timeline. If they really like, if they're really into, like, okay, we want to communicate this to our customers and tell them they need to update, and like, if they take it seriously, if they listen to us, and if they actually fix it, and that all, we're not like, oh, we are going to just disclose it right away when we can. It's not our goal to just disclose vulnerabilities. Our goal is to make sure that there is as as low impact on the security of the websites as possible in terms of getting breached and so forth. So that means they need to be aware of that, but we also want to make sure that we don't give that information to the wrong hands, who might just exploit that instead.
Yeah, and it's worth asking, how do you handle 0 days? And for those who don't know, a 0 day is basically a vulnerability that ends up in a while that somebody turns around and discloses and doesn't go through the 30-day disclosure policy. So how do you guys handle those?
So one of the things that we do at Patchstack, like, we have, I guess at this point, we probably might have like at least one of the biggest vulnerability databases about WordPress security vulnerabilities. I mean, partly because I think we have a competitive advantage here, just because we have that big community that is reporting vulnerabilities to us on a daily basis. So we get a lot of those new vulnerabilities added first. But at the same time, what we see is that in such cases where a vulnerability is being exploited before anyone is aware of that vulnerability even existing, except the hacker itself, then for those situations we basically work together with our partners. So our partners are like hosting companies, like Plesk, cPanel, Pagely, so forth. So we get like some level of insights in if that kind of attacks are happening somewhere. So we can dig more deeper into, okay, what that vulnerability might be based on like how the attack looks like. And the other thing is that we have like 2 layers of security that we are providing to our customers. One is the virtual patches, which is for every vulnerability that you see on Patchstack database, we create a specific virtual patch, or like a firewall rule, if you say, which is then blocking any malicious attempts against this specific vulnerability. So if you have a website that runs like a plugin that has, disclosed vulnerability today, but you haven't been able to, update it instantly, then you actually already have like a virtual patch enabled by Patchstack on your website. So the attacks are being blocked. The other thing now is that if there is no information that there is a vulnerability in that plugin and it is being exploited, then we have the second layer, which we call like a generic OWASP layer, which is basically like a more kind of regular set of firewall rules that block against like SQL injection and like all these different kind of vulnerability types that there are, that is not specific to a plugin or not specific to a vulnerability in a plugin or theme, but it is a specific filtering engine that tries to avoid like weird kind of use of your website, or like weird inputs that may look like an malicious exploit.
Yeah, that's really interesting and really helpful. Is there anything else that Patchstack does differently or than your competitors that's worth noting?
I think in general, I think it's the community and the focus. I guess like the fact that we are just so heavily pushing um, towards the aspect of let's like solve the problem from the root and actually make sure that the websites don't end up with vulnerabilities in the first place. So we are really like, we're doing our internal research, and we are actually giving giving back to the community of ethical hackers who help us identify new vulnerabilities that are existing already in the WordPress repository, and also on the premium plugins, because WordPress.org is not the only place where you have plugins. I think our company is the number one in terms of the amount of vulnerabilities discovered in Envato Marketplace, for example, like all the premium plugins that you don't even see on the WordPress.org. So I think this attention on the plugin vulnerabilities, and then also working together with vendors, this has given us a very good experience in terms of also providing like security audits for the vendors, like a bigger plugin developers who understand the importance of security, and they get like regular audits by us. And then the whole overview, or like the whole combination of kind of getting the community there and actually rewarding ethical hackers for contributing to WordPress security. I think this is it all may look a little bit like it is just something that we're like doing to give back to the community, but at the same time this all translates into better security ecosystem in general, and also a bit of a competitive advantage in terms of what we can provide to our customers.
Yeah, it's so true. If somebody is looking at Patchstack, what is the best way, and what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can always reach out to me at Twitter. It's at Oliver Sild. And I guess, you can just go to patchstack.com. We have free version that is free for 99 websites. Quite a good deal, I think. And like if you have like a lot of websites, you can just, connect your websites with Patchstack app. Let's say you have 50 websites, you can just connect them with our SaaS panel, and you will get notified about any vulnerability that has been found in your website. Any vulnerability that Patchstack Alliance or the ethical hackers community is reporting to us, you would be the first to know about those issues through us, and so on. So this is something that you can use for free for digital agencies who have like hundreds of websites, and they also need protection against these vulnerabilities. We have Patchstack Business Plan, where you just pay a fixed price and you can add as many websites as you want, and have like a full set of features for that matter. And then, if you're a hosting company, for example, you can always reach out to us. We can give you a threat intel feed. You can get the API access to a Patchstack database. So you'll always know about new vulnerabilities that may affect the customers within your hosting environment. And if you're a plugin vendor, if you're a developer of the plugin, you have the biggest impact to make. So if you want to make sure that your plugin is secure, and there isn't a vulnerability that someone could kind of exploit, the best thing to do is show it to hackers, show it to the ethical hackers who can find these issues and tell them to you, instead of a bad guy finding them and using it for something else. So reach out to us. We can also help with security auditing your plugins.
Thanks, Oliver, for jumping on and talking about Patchstack and the history and the story behind it, as well as where you're going. Have an amazing day.
You too. See ya.
This episode of the SDM Show was sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. A very special thank you to Oliver for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. Be sure to follow Patchstack to help you with your WordPress security needs. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, make your business succeed.